There's something that's happening in life lately where if you watch television, you're going to see a lot of ads about mental health. So let me hearken back. I'm so damn old. Back in the 1980s, they used to do ads where they'd show somebody in a hospital pretending to do an appendicitis on themselves. And they were saying, this is what happens when you try to treat alcoholism or addiction on your own. It's sort of like, removing your appendix on your own. They're kind of drawing that parallel. Of course, the most famous ad of all time is "This is your brain on drugs." And of course, the main objection to that was, is that really the best way to communicate with young people about drugs? But of course, what would Carl Hart say about "This is your brain on drugs"? Carl Hart would say, wait a second, who said there are only negative effects from drugs?
Yeah.
So that's a famous ad that sort of everybody knows is bad. But the operating on yourself thing, that still works. Speaking of Carl Hart, he uses Switzerland as an example of a place where you might get heroin. In Switzerland, can you believe this? They have public advertisements and billboards that say this: you can quit smoking on your own. You can quit heroin on your own.
Ah, well done.
Can you believe that?
God's honest truth.
And why would you want to give that message to people as opposed to imagining operating on your appendix, which makes everybody nauseous? Because
Are you asking me why you'd want? Why
did they bother to take out billboards?
Are you asking me why people would want to send the message to people who may otherwise feel in despair that don't double down on your despair? Let's look at true optimistic possibilities for yourself. And you're wondering why they might send that message to people. I mean, I know it's a rhetorical question.
They want to encourage people to know and to believe that they can quit their addictions, which people's in America, we actually tell people you can't quit smoking on your own, but people know you can because their father quit smoking,
Yeah.
So that's just an example of an ad, our way of communicating public health messages. So let's jump. There are two types of ads that I see on television about mental health. And they both relate. We're in a new era that you and I, this is the LPP network, the Life Process Program Network. We're an online service for helping people come to grips with addictions and related issues. And we've been doing it for 10 years. Now everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
And so there's now an industry of online stuff. And there's an industry of online medication prescriptions. And one of these ads shows a woman who was really, really depressed, she says. And when you see her, she's sort of just smiling. And she's been given a prescription to deal with her depression. And she looks really, really happy. And that's all you know about her. They show her in a room, nice looking room. They don't show her with any other human beings. A mother, children, a partner, They don't show her. I mean, what do you think of when you see a woman who really looks happy after she's taken drugs? I don't know. How do you react to that?
I finally found my life source. Yay. We don't say drugs are bad, don't take drugs. We also dissuade people from using a drug as a singular life source of living. And it sounds like with all the problems that a person could have been awash in. Yay, I found the solution. Yeah, right. So
if you were to see this ad and they told you this woman just took a painkiller, you would think she's addicted. And what you and I would say in response to that is, well, we need to know more about her life. And the life process program would be about building up those aspects of their life. All that they're showing a human being in isolation from their life, taking a drug as their life solution. That's a hard leap for people to make. Yes, but that's a prescription. She's taking antidepressants. She's not taking, well, painkillers are prescribed too, but she's not taking heroin. She's got a prescription. But you and I look at people in terms of the life process program as their life structure. So we don't have any reaction, like you said, to people taking drugs until we know, well, how are you paying for those drugs? Are you able to work? Are you able to have relationships? Are you able to raise your children or deal with stress that arises in your life? And you learn nothing about that woman and her life structure from watching this ad. That ad, I react to it by saying, well, this is an ad for addictive drug use. I mean, they're not going to let people advertise heroin that way. She just looks really happy with whatever drug it is she's taking. And you might say, wow, give me some of that drug. So now I'm going to jump to something slightly more complex. They have a series of they have online therapy sessions now. And remember, when I began this, I started talking about, well, operating on yourself. Yeah, would you operate on yourself? Then would you treat yourself for addiction? And so they have a bunch of people giving advice to somebody, let's say, who's depressed. And they say, oh, that's just a temporary state. You're going to get better. Or, try and take your mind off it by doing other things. Or, have you talked to your friends or your spouse or your mother or father, possibly even your doctor? And their point is that that's stupid to do those things.
Because you wouldn't operate on your own appendix. It's so stupid to look into your own life circumstances and try to make, constructive decisions for yourself. Yeah, I don't see the equivalence. It's not good.
And you and I know, and let's jump to who we are. We're the Life Process Program. We teach people to talk to other people in their lives as a way of getting support and reassurance. If you don't have a stable social setting and family setting, you're more vulnerable to bad things. Those are things that you want to do in your life. And so I have to point out, I began this by saying, well, we're in a business of providing online addiction and, related issue coaching services. So in a way, we're offering a similar kind of a service. So in a way, I'm talking against our own product because they're saying, oh, all these people, need to seek online services.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not talking against our own product. I mean, the way that a thing is packaged is not what we're arguing for or against, right? I mean, with our own program, we could say it's kind of nice. You can have these discussions and have these thoughts and make some decisions with a little bit of help. You can stay in your living room and you can reach out at your leisure. You can have someone looking at you, talking to you, with you, or you can be typing to somebody passively, or you could just be going on with these sort of open-ended questions that we ask people to consider. That's good. That's a solid way of accessing something like that, I think. That's how I would prefer to access it. But the message that you ought to, you ought to, rather than be introspective, you need to outsource. And so if you can't outsource through typical fashion, then you need to do it online, because we have these medications and we have these therapies for you, because Jesus, you wouldn't, take out your own liver. That the messaging there, the branding of that thing is what we're.
And we work, the very things that they're putting down, we work through.
Right.
We would say, we're not going to say, you can feel better if you communicate more with your children or your spouse and you become less depressed. They say you can't do that. And we're saying you can do that. To the extent that you do that too is good. And we want to encourage you to do more of that, because we're just somebody at the other end of your computer.
Right.
We're going to talk to you a couple times, whatever. This is an online helping service. This isn't your life. You're going to have to go out and live your life and not be depressed.
I talked to a man recently. I actually play music with him. I was playing a show with him last night, and he works with veterans and mental health. And he travels around the United States because he does an employment program, and he brought this to the organization that he works for here in the state, with the crazy notion that if you can get people to work, that's going to help them. And so he talks to clinicians and teams. He works with entire substance use treatment teams about, he'll discuss with them, well, how are you getting people employment and on their feet? And people were answering that, well, we need to get them abstinent first. He said, why do they need to be abstinent first? So, well, you can't hold down a job if you're not abstinent. And, he says some radical things, even though he works for the government, like, well, I drink and, I work. So keying in on those questions, trying to get them to see beyond. You can function. And as long as the person understands what is required of him or her in a job setting, then they can do it. It's not like you have to pee a certain color or way. Can you do a job or can you not? You work on life skills. And then there was also a contingency management program that he was working with that he said, we're happy to support this. If you want to provide contingencies for the abstinence, that's great. We need to know from you, because he does this fidelity kind of inventory with them. We need to know from you, your organization, what is it that transfers that contingency program to life? And people are confused.
Is this guy a musician that you were talking to?
Yeah. Musicians are always the best treatment providers.
You run into the most. We should point out that you live in Burlington, Vermont. I don't know if something like Nirvana out there. There's something called the Katz Newcomb Lectures.
Yeah.
I'm so old. Dan Katz was my thesis advisor. I used to hang out with Dan Katz. I hung out with him in Denmark when he went and taught there. And I knew Ted Newcomb. And way back at the beginning of Psychology Today in the early 70s, they interviewed Ted Newcomb. And he told this story. He had a graduate student and he got him a good job offer. And the guy said, I'm not going to take that job because I have to, work on my mental health and go to therapy. And Ted Newcomb blurted out, did you ever think that having a good job is therapeutic? I mean, that's so commonsensical. I mean, if you have a child, you have a child, I have children. All of my children are employed and like what they do. And damn it, I'm really happy about that. Isn't that like just one of the big things you can hope for in life?
Sure. I guess what you're saying, and what I was saying is that it's interesting that that idea seems radical. I mean, if you just say to a person who says, I'm upset with life, and you say, well, you know, you're working? No, but that is something I need to do. You know, anyone knows that that's a major pillar of life. And the fact that this guy has to go to organizations funded by our federal government, and they look at him like, what are you talking about? When he says, drugs, no drugs, contingency, no contingency. How do you help this person understand what he wants to do in his life so that he can work? And what is your program doing to nudge him that way, giving him agency? And people have to unwind, disentangle all the things they believe and think, and that's a hard sell for some reason.
And that commonsensical thing, which sort of everybody's grandmother used to know, if you ask anybody this question, are people happier and better mentally adjusted nowadays, especially children?
Right.
Nobody thinks the answer is yes.
Right.
Nobody thinks, oh, we're really doing great now. Everybody's much better adjusted. Anxiety and depression, they're nowhere around. I was just in a Mexican restaurant. I rode my bike all the way up to Park Slope, and I really needed a drink, a pomegranate drink. And the woman there was born in Mexico. I said, do you have kids? She says, I have 3 kids. And I started talking to her about being safe in the neighborhood. And she gave me an answer that I sort of knew, but I didn't realize. She said, oh, my kids don't go outside. I said, well, how old are your kids? And she says, well, my oldest son is 14 years old. And oh, you've been in my neighborhood. You know, I'm near Prospect Park, one of the greatest parks in America.
Yeah.
And she begs her son to go to the park, and he won't do it. I can't even get my head around that. And I say, tell me a little bit about your life to the woman when you grew up in Mexico. And she just laughed. She said, I didn't have any brothers. So, you know, when I got up in the morning, I had to do 50 things for my family to live. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she's come to America to be next to this magnificent park, and her son won't leave the house. And I always ask the same stupid question. I say, you know, obviously you weren't, by any standards, she was super poor. Now she owns a restaurant in Brooklyn. I say, do you think in some ways you were luckier and had a better life growing up poor in Mexico than your own children? He says, yeah, I believe that. Oh, so in a way, we're such, what's that word? What do you call troglodytes or whatever they call people who are like stuck in the past? Ted Newcomb, back in the early 70s, having a good job, going outside to the park,
Those are good treatments. It's almost like we're saying, you call the IT service center and the first question they ask is whether you plugged it in. That's what we're doing. Did you plug it in?
The simplest advice we have is the life process program is a way that we help you plug into life and not to be afraid. No, all you have to do is put it in a socket, and then you have to, do a few things to turn the machine on. And we're just going to go along with you. It ain't brain science. We're going to encourage you to do it and maybe help talk your way through it a little bit and ask how you feel.
If somebody who's out there watching or listening is tech savvy, graphic design savvy, and makes that branding logo for us, we'll reward you handsomely.
A life process program plugin app.
Right.
So, okay, we've just talked about you're sitting there watching television, seeing people take drugs and being told it's good, and being told, don't try and deal with your depression or your anxiety on your own by dealing with life, the people you know. And we're an online, treatment's the wrong word, helping coaching service. But somehow we're coming at it in a little bit different direction that we've tried to make clear to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Stanton, and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.